All right, example 1 for complex numbers, where we're going to put this expression 4 times I times the quantity 8 plus 5 times I in A plus BI form, which is our standard complex number form here. And to do this, we're just going to use the properties of algebra that we already know, which is, in this case, distribution. So I get 32 times I from doing 4I times 8. 4 times 8 is 32. And then we have this term of I. We treat I just like a variable, if we would if it was an X or an N or a Y or whatever we want. But we got to keep in mind here that this I represents the square root of -1, which is that imaginary number. And then we get a positive 20 times I squared from 4I times 5I. The 20 comes from 4 times 5, and the I squared comes from I times I. So we look at this and we see, well, I is the square root of -1, so I squared is going to be -1. So if I simplify that, I can change this I squared to -1 because I times I is -1, and then 20 times -1 is -20. So we have 32I minus 20. We want to put this in A plus BI form, and that's not exactly the form that it's in. So we're going to kind of use the commutative property to switch that around, and we get -20 plus 32I, and that is our A plus BI form of this expression, where A, the real part of this complex number, is -20, and B, the complex or imaginary part, the imaginary part of this number is positive 32. Another example, very similar. I'm going to do some distribution here. We have a 6 minus 2I times the quantity 4 plus 3I, so we're just going to carry out that distribution. 24 comes from 6 times 4. Positive 18I comes from 6 times positive 3I. The negative 8I comes from negative 2I times 4. And then the negative 6I squared comes from negative 2 times positive 3. And then I times I is I squared. See some simplification, so we're just using our basic algebra skills here to kind of simplify this. We're treating I just like a variable. So we can combine these two like terms. Negative 18I minus 8I is going to be 10I. And then I'm going to change I squared to -1, because if I is the square root of -1, then I squared has to be -1. Further simplification here, -6 times a -1 is going to be a positive 6. And then we have another pair of like terms here, 24 and 6. Simplified to 30. 30 plus 10I is our simplified version of the product of these two complex numbers in our A plus B times I form, where 30 is the real part of this complex number, and 10 is the imaginary part because it's the coefficient of I, which is the square root of